Shalom and welcome back. In this video, I want to deal with the plague of lice and flies or the swarm. I'm dealing with these topics, the topics of the plagues, because in them there's a meaning and significance that relates to what God did in sending Yahushua HaMashiach, that is Jesus Christ, to the earth. And I want to begin with what Stephen says about Moses. It says, and Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was powerful in words and in deeds. In the last two videos of this series, I have explained that Moses was living like an Egyptian. Moses was raised in the Nubian family of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. It was at that time that Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. Now, what is the wisdom of the Egyptians? The wisdom of the Egyptians are everything that they created concerning their gods, whether it's astrology, whether it's mathematics, science, all of those things point back to their belief in their gods. However, Moses, though he learned all the wisdom of the Egyptians and believed in the gods of Egypt, Moses had an encounter with the one true God that changed his perspective concerning Egyptian beliefs. Now, Hebrews 11 says this about Moses. It says, by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents because they saw he was a proper child, and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. By faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather, watch this, to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. And there are things that the Egyptians did in worshiping their God. He goes on to say, let me go back. Choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt. Now, when he says esteeming the reproach of Christ greater than the riches, greater, let me go back. Esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. And that statement points back to the fact that after the burning bush experience, Moses began to get insight into Yahushua HaMashiach. Yahushua HaMashiach said, or Jesus Christ, whatever name you want to call him, said that Moses wrote about me. Well, Moses can only do that if he has knowledge concerning Yahushua HaMashiach. And God gave Moses insight into the truth about the birth, death, and resurrection of Yahushua HaMashiach. But not only the resurrection of Yahushua HaMashiach, he gave him insight in what he did, that's God, from the beginning, and what he was going to do leading up to the end of the world and the end of the world. For he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. By faith, he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. In other words, because Moses saw him who is invisible through the things that God gave Moses insight about, Moses was not fearful of the wrath of the king, and he endured. Now, you need to know that Moses was very well versed in the theology of the ancient Egyptians. And I've been attempting to demonstrate that in the first two videos concerning the plague of water being turned into blood and the other plague. I forget which one the other one that I had covered. But the point is that Moses is demonstrating through his writing that he is well versed in the beliefs of the Egyptians. But many people, especially Christians, don't know how Moses used the Egyptian wisdom in his writings, or they don't even know that Egyptian imagery exists in the writings of Moses. They're ignorant. Moses saw the one true God that is invisible by literal fire, a pillar of fire, and a pillar of smoke, um, in the cloud on the mountain, in the burning bush, and the light. Moses also felt his presence, and his presence, Moses wrote, made Moses tremble. All right. And now, if we go on to the next slide, let me make sure that, yeah, that's the next slide. The Apostle Paul gives us insight into how God viewed the Egyptians and the Babylonians for that matter. Romans chapter 1, verse 16 says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of the accomplishment of the promise of the anointed one. For it is, that is, the gospel, is the power of God to gain salvation. That is, to everyone that believes." Only those who believe will gain salvation, not those who don't believe. Now, the interesting thing that you need to keep in mind is that you have to believe a certain content, and that content has to be the truth. One, you can't believe nothing at all. This is not the leap of faith garbage that Christians tend to express. You just don't believe nothing, no content at all. You have to have some content and the proper context to that content in order for you to believe the truth. And it has to be the truth. He says, "For it is the power of God to gain a salvation, that is, to everyone that believes, to the Yahudim first, and also to the native Greek. For God's pronouncement of not guilty is made known in it, in that gospel, from the basis of belief, which is the result in accordance to belief, just like it has been written, but the one who is blameless will live by his belief. For the wrath of God is made known from heaven against all profaneness and injustice of mankind, who are detaining the truth in a pronouncement of guilty." And it would say in unrighteousness. I just translated it as pronouncement of guilty because that's what unrighteousness means. But he is also talking about the fact that they are detaining the truth in a lie, because that which was understood concerning God, which means that they had the truth, is made known in them, for God showed it, that is, the things concerning God, he showed it to them. He showed it to the sons of Noah. And the sons of Noah decided to distort the truth. And so that's the problem that God has with the Babylonians. That is, all of the nations who were one at the Tower of Babel. That event, there's a lot in that event. So don't believe this garbage that says they were trying to be famous. They were trying to make a name, and that is an idiom, make a name. And if you don't know what make a name is or means, or if you believe that make a name means that something about being famous, then you need to check your head, because all the earth was one. So tell me, to whom would they look to for fame if all are one? You have to be a divided people in order to have someone famous among you. Romans 20 through 25, Paul continues, for the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly viewed, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and divine nature, so that they are without excuse, because after knowing God, they did not acknowledge him as God. Do you hear the arrogance that the sons of Noah possessed? After knowing God, after knowing the truth concerning God, they did not acknowledge him as God. Neither were they grateful, but they were futile in their imaginations, and they were darkened in their unintelligent heart. Professing to be wise ones, they became asinine, and they changed the glory of the uncorruptible God, who is invisible, into an image made like corruptible man, and of birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things. For this reason, God also gave them up. For this reason, God also, that also means addition, gave them up to uncleanness via the lust of their hearts, to defile their own bodies between themselves, who changed God's truth into a lie, and honored and served the creation instead of the one who is creating it, the one who is blessed for the ages, no doubt. And so the Egyptians made the invisible God into the image of man, birds, and four-footed beasts. For the Egyptian king named Pharaoh was the invisible God in the flesh. Pharaoh simply means great house. The Egyptians believed the king of Egypt was the body in which the invisible God dwelled. That's why he is called Pharaoh, the great house. This is why he was given the epithet Pharaoh, like I said, which means great house. He was regarded as a divine God king, providing a direct link between the gods and the Egyptian people. As a ruler, Pharaoh was the center of power and a divine living embodiment of Horus. Horus was the firstborn son of Osiris and was born through a miraculous conception after Osiris was murdered and dismembered by his brother Seth. By his brother Seth. And what I'm telling you is that these things resemble the birth of Yahushua HaMashiach because God was mocking the Egyptians. Yes, the Egyptian uh, theology came before Jesus, Yahushua HaMashiach, was born. But Yahushua HaMashiach was born as a mocking, taunting disapproval of Egyptian mythology. God said, okay, you're going to create me into an image of man, beast, and birds. Well, I'm going to mock you by taking what is false in your ideology and make it a reality because nothing is impossible with God. And so God is mocking the Egyptians and the Babylonians because of what they believe. They distorted the truth concerning God. But you can't get comfortable with Egyptian imagery because Horus was also the sun god Ra Horakhti, who entered the land of the dead as Afu Ra, which means the dead flesh of Ra, who is also Osiris. All of this leads back to Neb Etcher, the name of the invisible God that they made into an image of a man, bird, and four-footed beast. Neb Etcher is just the name that they gave the invisible God who is true, but they made him into a lie by making the true God who is invisible birds, the image of man, the image of bird, and the image of four-footed beasts. To the Egyptians, Neb Etcher is the distortion. Well, I shouldn't say to the Egyptians. I should say Neb Etcher is the distortion of the true God of the Bible who is invisible. And so what I'm doing here in the videos concerning the plagues is I'm attempting to lead you through this trail to show you the missing pieces that the church fathers did not know because the truth was already distorted when the apostles died. The important part here is that they, that is the Egyptians and the Babylonians and any mystery religion for that matter, changed the truth about God into a lie. And in these series of videos, I'm dealing with the Egyptians because God chose Moses for the intent of mocking the wise ones who became asinine. Exodus 8, starting at 16 and 19, begins the plague concerning the lice and the swarm of flies. So we'll begin to deal with that plague here. Verse 16 says, and Moses and Yahuwah said to Moses, you say to Aaron, stretch out your staff, and you must cause to strike the dust of the earth, and he will be for lice in all the land of Mitzrayim. And they did so, and Aaron stretched out his hand with his staff, And he struck the dust of the land, and she became the lice in man and in beast. All the dust of the earth became lice in all the land of Mitzrayim. That's Egypt. And the magicians did so with their mystery enchantments, but did not have power to bring out the lice in order that she becomes the lice in man and in beast. And the magicians said to the great house, that is Pharaoh, that this that is the finger of God, and he hardened his heart, and he hardened the heart of Pharaoh. I made a typo there, uh, so I'll have to fix that. And he did not attentively listen to them as that word of Yahuwah. To understand the plague of the lice and swarm of flies, you must understand the Egyptian theology concerning the earth god Geb. Information concerning Egypt's theology about Geb deals with the throne of Geb, but Geb is also the one authorizing the resurrection of the king of Egypt, that is, the great house. I want to read a few utterances concerning Geb from the pyramid text to show you what the Egyptians believed, and then show you what God and Moses was mocking. In the pyramid text under the title The Sarcophagus Text, utterance 2 is a recitation by Geb, and it says, "The king is my bodily son." And the bracket with the dots just is indication that the rest of the recitation uh, was lost. Now, this is a declaration of Geb and what the Egyptians believe. The Egyptians believe that the king, that is the dead Pharaoh, is the bodily son of Geb. So Geb is his father, the king is his son. The king was born from the body of Geb. Geb was the god of the physical earth, the rocks, the mountains, and the ground beneath your feet. The imagery of Egypt was that the ground was the source of life and living plants came from it. When they compared that to their god Geb, they saw the king growing out of the earth. That is the personification of the earth god. So the king came out of the earth twice, once at his birth and the other at his resurrection after his death. Therefore, the king was believed to be the son of Geb because he came from his bowels. That means he came from the earth. Utterance 3 in the pyramid text under the title Sarcophagus text. This is recited by Nut for Geb. It says, "The king is my beloved son, my firstborn, upon the throne of Geb, with whom Geb is well pleased, and he has given to him his heritage in the presence of the great Anid. All the gods are in joy, and they say, how goodly is the king. His father Geb is pleased with him." As you can see, this pyramid text is thousands of years before Yahushua HaMashiach. And there are elements in this utterance that resemble things stated in the Gospels. This should let you know that they were knowledgeable of the same imagery contributed to Christ because they understood what Moses wrote only because Christ taught them after his resurrection. Luke 24:27 says, and beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he, that is Jesus, explained thoroughly unto them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. The things concerning himself is found in Moses and the prophets. Now, the throne of Geb is the inheritance of the king. The scriptures draw on this imagery to explain why and how Yahushua HaMashiach, or Jesus, became the anointed one and king of Yisrael. The last utterance I'm going to show you, and there's plenty more, but I'm only going to show you three, is found in utterance 256, and it is titled "The Dead King Assumes His Royal Heritage." And it says, "I have succeeded to Geb, I have succeeded to Geb, I have succeeded to Atam. I am on the throne of Horus the firstborn, and his eye is my strength. I am protected from what was done against him. The flaming blast of my Uraeus is that of Anutet, who is upon me. I have set the fear of me in the hearts by making strife with them," that is, his enemies. "The gods have looked on in nudity and bowed to me in adoration. Row me, O mother of mine." He's talking about um, Nut, the sky goddess. Uh, so he. What's happening here is when he says, "Row me, O mother of mine," the king is the sun god Ra, because Ra sailed across the sky. The sky was the waters below, or the waters above the Nile, which is the waters beneath for the Egyptians. Ra was thought to have sailed from east to west, and from west to east, where he was risen as a new sun. In other words, it's referring to the death and resurrection of the Pharaoh. So when he says, "Row me, O mother of mine," he is talking about the fact that he is going from east to west, where the land of the dead is, and being resurrected back in the east as uh, Kapira, the first light of the dawn of the day. And he's just reiterating, "Told me, O abode of mine, make fast your cable." Now, the inheritance of the dead king is not just the throne of his father Geb, but also the resurrection from the dead. I show you these hymns because you need to have insight into what God is mocking. If you don't know what the Egyptians believed, how are you going to know what God is mocking? The church fathers were unable to provide insight into what Moses and the prophets understood and mocked, because they lost insight into the parabolic imagery in which the apostles handed down to the assemblies. But you have to keep in mind that the apostles, during the time of their life on earth, they were already dealing with heretics who were distorting the parabolic imagery of the truth that you can find in Moses and the prophets. Now, in Exodus 8, starting at verse 16, it says, "And Yahuwah said to Moses, You say to Aaron, Stretch out your staff, and you must cause to strike the dust of the earth, and he will be for lice in all the land of Mitzrayim." Geb was believed to be the king over all the earth, making him equivalent to the Adam of Genesis 1:26. That dominion was being passed down to the king, that is, the firstborn son of Geb. This is the Egyptians distorting the truth concerning the plan of God. This is the Egyptians distorting God's truth and creating a lie. Geb eventually gives his authority to his firstborn son, the king. Now, there is a twofold purpose for Yahuwah transforming the dust of the ground to lice. First, it is to prevent purity in the people of Egypt. In Herodotus, his writings, histories, in chapter 2, verse 37 or 2.37, Herodotus gives us insight into what the Egyptian priests believed. He says this, speaking of the Egyptian priests, they are religious excessively beyond all other men. And with regard to this, they have customs as follows. They drink from cups of bronze and rinse them out every day. Doesn't that sound familiar? The Pharisees did the same thing. I'm just giving you where the Pharisees got their washing their cups and plates every day. They got it from the Egyptians. I'm telling you that because the Pharisees and the Yahudim lost insight into the truth concerning what Moses wrote. And they took the imagery of the Egyptians literally. And not some only do this, but all. They wear garments of linen, always newly washed, and this they make a special point of practice. They circumcise themselves for the sake of cleanliness, preferring to be clean rather than comely. The priests shave themselves all over their body every other day so that no lice or any other foul thing may come to be upon them when they minister to the gods. So having lice on their body was considered to be a foul thing, and it made them foul or ritually impure. And they could not minister to the gods. This is what they believed. And the priests wear garments of linen only, and sandals of papyrus, and any other garment they may not take, nor other sandals. These wash themselves in cold water twice in a day, and twice again in the night. And other religious services they perform, one may almost say, of infinite number. They enjoy all also good things, not a few, for they do not consume or spend anything of their own substance, but there is sacred bread baked for them, and they have each great quantity of flesh of oxen and geese coming into them each day. And also wine of grapes is given to them, but it is not permitted to them to taste of fish. Why? Because the fish was in the river Nile. The river Nile was considered the lifeblood of Osiris, and so fish were sacred. Beans, moreover, the Egyptians do not at all sow in their land, that is the ground. And those which grow they neither eat raw nor boil for food. Nay, the priests do not endure even to look upon them, thinking this to be an unclean kind of host. And there is not one priest only for each of the gods, but many. and of them one is chief priest or high priest. And whenever a priest dies, his son is appointed to his place. Do you not see the things that Moses wrote in this statement concerning the priest from Herodotus? The second purpose was to mock the Egyptians by showing them that Geb, the father of Pharaoh, was unclean. The lice came from the ground. In this, God is mocking the Egyptian belief. Pharaoh could not appear before the gods on earth or in heaven at his resurrection because of ritual impurity. How? Yahuwah made lice to come from the dust of the ground and sit on the people and on beasts in this plague. Let me get back to it. Pharaoh could not appear before the gods on earth or in heaven at his resurrection because of ritual impurity. And Geb, his father, was impure and produced an impure seed. That is Pharaoh, which is said to be Geb's bodily son. And you have to keep in mind that the Egyptians believed that Geb was the personification of the ground. So if lice came from the dust of the ground, lice came from Geb, and Geb produced an impure seed. That is Pharaoh. God is mocking the Egyptians. Exodus 8:20 through 24 says, and Yahuwah said to Moses, you get up in the morning, and you must stand before the great house. Look, he is coming out the water, and you will say to him, so said Yahuwah, you must let my people go, so they will serve me. Because if you do not let my people go, look, I'm sending on you and on your servants and on your people and on your houses the swarm, and the houses of Mitzrayim will be full of the swarm, and also upon the ground which they are upon. And I will cause a distinction, watch this, in that day, in the day that he sends the swarm, in the land of Goshen, in her where my people are residing, that no swarm be there, to the intent that you will know that I am Yahuwah in the middle of the earth. And I will make a ransom to distinguish between my people and between your people. Tomorrow he will be the distinguishing mark. When he says tomorrow he will be the distinguishing mark, he is talking of in the third person masculine singular of the pronoun he, and he's referring to Israel, his firstborn son, will be the distinguishing mark or sign, which is the distinguishing mark. And Yahuwah did so, and a heavy swarm came toward the house of Pharaoh and the house of his servants, and in all the land of Mitzrayim, the earth will be corrupt from the presence of the swarm. So the earth will be corrupt. That is, and you have to keep in mind that Geb is the personification of the earth. So the earth, that is Geb, will be corrupt because of the presence of the swarm. But you have to notice that God did not send the swarm to the land of Goshen because he wanted to make a distinction between his people that are residing there. His people cannot be corrupt. So what he's saying is that Israel, his firstborn son, is ritually pure and will inherit God's throne. That's what he's speaking about here. The swarms that God sends is to make a distinction between the Pharaoh and his people and God's firstborn son Israel and his people. You must keep in mind that God made all the sons of and daughters of Jacob one man, the corporate body of Israel, his firstborn son. The members of the body of God's firstborn son is called all Israel. Look it up. God's distinction between Pharaoh, the so called son of God, lowercase g, and his people, and Israel and his people, all Israel, is a mocking to show Pharaoh that Israel would be the only ritually pure king to ascend the throne of his father. All the members in Israel, that is, all Israel, God's firstborn son will attain the resurrection and sit with him as kings over the earth. With this plague, God begins to provide insight into his plan for his firstborn son, Israel. And this is how Moses is writing about Jesus Christ, Yahushua Hamashiach, by using the sons of Jacob as the parabolic blueprint for the intentions of God. The plagues are the most important information that provides insight into the basic message of the gospel of the accomplishment of the promise concerning the anointed one, Yahushua HaMashiach. It mocks the death and resurrection of the Pharaoh and provides insight into the death and resurrection of Yahushua HaMashiach, that is, Jesus Christ. We still have plenty of information to cover. And so I want to get most of it out. So when Passover comes, you can gain insight into what the Passover means so that faith and works can be working correctly. The parabolic pantomime of the Passover is not to gain righteousness produced by you doing the feast, that is, works. It is to reveal the truth concerning Jesus Christ. Doing the feast is just proof that you believe the content of the meaning and significance of the feast. If you don't have the meaning and significance of the feast, you're just doing the feast just because you're doing the feast. You're doing it to no avail. In other words, you do it because you know what the feast means and you believe the truth found in the meaning and significance of the feast. Paul says belief in the word is what provides God's righteousness, not the works in doing the feast. Making sure you don't offend God is breaking the 10 commandments. Let me state that again. Making sure you don't offend God by breaking the 10 commandments is what gives you, or I should say, is the maintenance of the righteousness that you obtain by your belief in the truth. So you believe the truth and gain righteousness, like Abraham believed the truth and and it was accounted to him for righteousness. But keeping and guarding the commandments, that's what keep means. It means guard or place a hedge around the commandments in order to guard it, is what I forget the point that I was trying to make. Guarding the commandments is what keeps you from sin. So if you commit adultery, if you worship other gods, uh, and it's very important to understand that you not committing adultery against your wife is because you understand the truth concerning Israel being the bride of God. Because God said in various scriptures that he was a husband to Israel. And so if you commit adultery, break the 10 commandments by committing adultery against your wife, you are committing adultery against God, because the commandments also was meant to be taught. And I just gave you insight into the part about adultery. And there's a lot to explain in that regard. But Israel is a wife to God, because God said that he was the husband to Israel. He's speaking parabolically. But faith and works is you don't commit adultery down here because you understand the meaning and significance of what committing adultery is. It is cutting yourself off willingly from your husband, that is God. It's parabolic imagery. Let me find my place. Okay. So when I begin to deal with Paul's understanding of the law, I will show you all about what Paul meant by being under grace and not being under the law and all of that stuff. Because you have to understand that in the wisdom that Paul has, he understands the distinction between the law, and all this law. These are all phrases that is found in the writings of Moses. And if you don't understand the distinction of it, you will come away believing garbage. Shalom.